"If I lose, I'll be yours," said the giant orc. She was utterly shocked by the powerful human judge. There are exactly 3 types of people who walk into the Iron Mug Tavern on a Saturday night. Those looking for cheap ale, those looking for cheaper company, and those looking to prove something they probably shouldn't. Adrian had spent 10 years watching all 3 types, and he could tell which category someone belonged to before they finished opening the door. The orc woman who shattered that door off its hinges. She was category 4, a category Adrian didn't know existed until that moment. She had to duck, not just tilt her head, actually fold herself nearly in half to fit through the doorway. 7 feet and 3 inches of green skin, battle scars, and the kind of confidence that comes from never having lost at anything that mattered. The leather armor she wore had seen more fights than most soldiers survive, and the iron ring on her right index finger caught the firelight like a warning. Otto, the tavern keeper, dropped the mug he'd been nervously polishing for the past 20 minutes. It shattered. He didn't notice. He was too busy calculating whether his insurance covered acts of orc. "I hear," the orc woman said, her voice carrying the kind of accent that turned every word into a challenge, "that this place has arm wrestling matches." She looked around the tavern like she was surveying a battlefield. "I hear the judge here knows what he's doing." Adrian, sitting in his usual corner with his usual ale, felt every eye in the room turn toward him. He'd been a judge for over a decade, officiated hundreds of matches between miners, soldiers, merchants trying to settle debts, young men trying to impress young women. He knew every trick, every technique, every way someone tried to cheat or gain advantage. He'd never judged a match involving an orc. "I'm Adrian," he said, standing up slowly. At 5'11", he was average height for a human. Next to her, he felt like a child at his father's workbench. "I judge the matches here, yes." She studied him with eyes the color of burnished copper. "You look small." "I get that a lot." "You look weak." "I get that too." Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, that he wasn't intimidated, or offended, or running. "My name is Rada," she said. "I am from the Ironhide clan, East Mountains. I have 49 consecutive victories in tests of strength among my people." She held up her right hand, showing him the ring. In the firelight he could count the marks etched into the iron, 49 scratches. 49 victories. "I came here for number 50. "Congratulations," Adrian said. "Who's your opponent?" Rada smiled. It was the kind of smile that made small animals reconsider their life choices. "You are." The tavern went so quiet, you could hear Otto's heart trying to escape through his chest. Adrian blinked. "I'm the judge." "You were the judge," Radha corrected. "Now you are my 50th victory." She walked toward him, each step making the floorboards creak in protest. "Unless you are frightened of losing to an orc woman." It was a good bait. Adrian had seen better, but not by much. Pride was a lever that moved mountains, and she was pulling it with the skill of someone who'd done this before. "I don't compete," Adrian said calmly. "I judge." "There's a difference." "The difference," Rada said, now standing close enough that he had to tilt his head back to meet her eyes, "is that judges are competitors who are too afraid to lose." Otto made a sound like a dying accordion. Vera, Adrian's neighbor who'd been drinking in the corner while having an animated conversation with a tabby cat, stood up. "Oh, honey," she said to the cat. "This is going to be bad. Mr. Whiskers agrees. He says the tall green lady doesn't know what she's doing." Adrian felt something shift inside him. It wasn't anger. He'd learned to kill anger years ago because anger made you sloppy. It was something else. Curiosity, maybe. This orc woman had walked into his tavern, challenged him specifically, and seemed absolutely certain she would win. "If I accept," Adrian said slowly, "what are we betting?" Rada's smile widened. "If I win, which I will, you give me everything you own, your home, your possessions, your savings, and you become my student. I will teach you what real strength looks like." The tavern erupted in muttering. Otto dropped another mug. This one didn't break because it landed on his foot. "And if I win?" Adrian asked. Rada laughed. It was a big laugh, the kind that filled rooms and made windows rattle. If you win, little human judge, then I am yours. By Orc tradition, a warrior defeated in honorable combat pledges themselves to the victor. You would own my service, my loyalty, my life. She said it like she was offering to bet a copper penny. Like the possibility of losing was so remote, it didn't deserve serious consideration. Adrian should have said no. A sane man would have said no. A smart man would have found a polite way to decline and gone back to his ale and his quiet, predictable, lonely life. Instead, Adrian found himself studying her, really studying her. The way she stood with all her weight on her back foot, overconfident in her strength, the way her right arm, the one with the ring, had slightly more developed muscle than her left. She favored that side. The way she kept her shoulders loose, like someone who'd never needed to learn defensive positioning because offense had always been enough. And beneath all that, she was beautiful. Not in the way human women were beautiful, with their soft edges and carefully practiced smiles. Rada was beautiful like a storm was beautiful. Raw, powerful, impossible to ignore. She was everything Adrian's careful, controlled, lonely life wasn't. He'd been alone for 3 years. 3 years since his last relationship ended, badly enough that he'd sworn off trying. 3 years of watching other people's happiness from behind his judge's table. 3 years of being safe, being cautious, being small. I accept, Adrian said. Rada's eyes widened slightly. Truly? Truly. Adrian walked to the center table that Otto used for arm wrestling matches. It was scarred oak, reinforced with iron bands, built to withstand miners who didn't know their own strength. But we do this properly. Official match, Otto witnesses, standard rules, first to pin wins. Agreed. Rada followed him, her footsteps making the tavern feel like it was under siege. This will not take long. They sat across from each other. The height difference was almost comical. Rada had to slouch to get her elbow positioned properly on the table, while Adrian could sit normally. Their hands clasped, and Adrian's completely disappeared inside hers. Her palm was rough with calluses, warm like sun-baked stone. "Ready?" Adrian asked. "I was born ready," Rada said. "Were you born afraid?" Otto, standing at the end of the table, looked like he wanted to be literally anywhere else. "On my count," he said, voice shaking. 3, 2, 1, go!" Rada pushed. She pushed with the kind of force that Adrian had only ever seen from oxen and falling trees. The table groaned. The iron bands creaked. Otto made another dying accordion sound, and Adrian's hand didn't move. Not an inch, not a fraction of an inch. Rada's eyes went from confident to surprised to confused in the span of a heartbeat. She pushed harder. Adrian felt the force. It was real, substantial, the kind of strength that could probably bend horseshoes for fun. But strength, Adrian had learned in 10 years of watching, was only half the equation. Technique was the other half. Adrian had his elbow positioned at exactly the right angle. His wrist was locked, turned slightly inward to protect the joint. His shoulder was engaged, his core was tight, his feet were braced against the floor at precisely the correct distance. He wasn't trying to overpower her. He was redirecting her force back into the table, making her fight the oak and iron instead of him. "You're not moving?" Rada said, genuinely shocked. "Neither are you," Adrian pointed out. She growled, an actual growl that came from deep in her chest, and pushed harder. Adrian felt sweat start to bead on his forehead. This was the longest he'd ever held against pure strength like this. His muscles were screaming. His shoulder felt like it was on fire, but he held. 30 seconds passed, then a minute, then 2. The crowd in the tavern was silent. Vera whispered something to her cat. The cat meowed back. "Impossible," Rada muttered. "You're too small, too weak. This is impossible." 10 years, Adrian said through gritted teeth, of watching, learning, understanding that strength means nothing without control. He shifted his weight slightly, adjusted his grip microscopically. I know every mistake people make, every opening, every weakness. Radha's arm was shaking now, not from weakness, she still had strength in reserve, but from confusion, from her entire worldview crashing down around her. She'd spent 28 years believing that power was all that mattered, and this small human was teaching her otherwise in real time. Adrian saw his opening. The moment her confusion made her falter, made her force become uneven. He didn't push. He turned his wrist, redirected her power back at her, used her own strength as leverage. Her hand went down, slowly at first, then inevitably. Like watching a mountain realize it's been standing on sand. When her knuckles touched the table, the sound echoed like thunder. Nobody breathed. Radha stared at her defeated hand like it belonged to someone else, like reality had just rearranged itself without permission. I lost? You lost, Adrian confirmed. His arm felt like it was going to fall off, but he kept his voice steady. To a human. To technique. Radha looked up at him, and Adrian saw something in her eyes he didn't expect. Not anger, not shame, something else. Something that looked almost like respect. I have never lost, she said quietly. Not once. Not ever. I know, Adrian said. 49 victories. Now 49 victories and 1 loss. Her hand moved to the iron ring. Slowly, like it hurt to do it, she twisted it off her finger. 49 marks glinted in the firelight. The mark for 50 would never be etched. She placed the ring on the table between them. By tradition, she said, her voice carrying the weight of something breaking, this belongs to you now. And so do I. Adrian picked up the ring. It was warm from her hand, heavier than he expected. I don't want to own anyone. That is not how Orc tradition works, Radha said. I made an oath, in front of witnesses, on my honor as a warrior. She stood up, and even though she'd just lost, even though her entire identity had just shattered, she stood with her back straight. Where you go, I go. What you command, I do. Until you release me from this oath, I am bound to you. The tavern had gone from silent to dead silent. Even the fire seemed to have stopped crackling. Adrian looked at the ring in his hand, at the Orc woman standing before him, pride warring with honor in every line of her body, at his own small, quiet life that had just exploded into something he couldn't begin to understand. All right, he said finally, then I guess you're coming home with me. Otto dropped his mug. This time it broke. Adrian's home was not built for orcs. It was barely built for humans. The cottage stood at the edge of town, small enough that one good storm might convince it to relocate, with a thatched roof that leaked in exactly 3 spots that Adrian had mapped out over the years. Radha stood in front of it, staring like someone had just shown her a child's drawing and called it a fortress. This is where you live, she asked. This is it. Adrian confirmed, unlocking the door. Where is the rest of it? That's the full tour. She ducked through the doorway. She had to turn sideways and fold herself nearly double, and stood in what Adrian generously called his living area. Her head brushed the ceiling beams. Her shoulders were wider than the doorway. She looked around at his simple furniture, his small fireplace, his shelf of books, like someone had just shown her an alien landscape. You live like this by choice? Radha asked. Not everyone needs a fortress. Everyone needs space to move without breaking things. I'll grant you that, Adrian said, watching her navigate around his table like it was a complicated puzzle. You'll have to be careful. This place wasn't built with 7-foot orcs in mind. Radha sat down on his chair. The wood creaked ominously but held. I am 7'3", she corrected. My apologies. They sat in awkward silence. Adrian realized he had no idea what you did with an orc warrior who'd just sworn their life to you after losing a bet. This wasn't covered in any judge's handbook he'd ever read. Are you hungry? He asked finally. Radha looked at him like he'd just asked if she breathed air. I am always hungry. Orc bodies require more food than human bodies. It is basic biology. I'll take that as a yes. Adrian moved to his small kitchen area. I don't have much. Some bread, cheese, dried meat. That is fine, Radha said. Then quieter, I am not used to being fed by others. Adrian paused while slicing bread. There was something in her voice, a crack in that warrior facade. Among orcs, he said carefully, I imagine you're usually the one doing the feeding. I hunt for my clan, Radha said. I provide. I protect. That is what warriors do. She looked down at her hands. The right hand, where the ring used to be, looked naked. That is what warriors are supposed to do. Adrian brought over bread, cheese, and what meat he had. It wasn't much, but Radha ate it like she hadn't seen food in days. He sat across from her, nursing a cup of water, watching this massive woman try to fold herself into his human-sized life. Can I ask you something? Adrian said. Radha nodded, mouth full. Why did you come to challenge me specifically? She swallowed. Because I heard about you, the judge who never competed, who watched hundreds of matches but never tested himself. She met his eyes. I thought you would be easy, weak, a human who hid behind rules instead of fighting. And now, Radha trailed off, now I do not know what to think. You are still small, still weak by orc standards, but you defeated me. She touched her right hand again, that absent gesture of someone who'd lost something precious. You defeated me without strength. How is that possible? Because strength isn't everything, Adrian said. It's important, but so is leverage, positioning, understanding how force works. I've spent 10 years watching people make the same mistakes, relying on power when technique would serve them better. Among orcs, we believe strength is honor, Radha said. The strongest leads, the strongest protects, the strongest decides. And what happens when strength isn't enough? Radha stared at her empty plate. Then you lose. And losing means you were never strong to begin with. That is how it works. Adrian could hear the weight of entire culture in those words. A world view built on one principle, cracking because that principle had finally failed. You're still strong, he said. You just met someone who fought differently. That does not make me feel better. It wasn't supposed to. They sat in silence again, but this time it felt less awkward. More like two people trying to figure out a puzzle they didn't have instructions for. I will sleep on the floor, Radha announced, standing up. Her head hit the ceiling beam. She swore in Orcish. Adrian didn't understand the words, but he understood the sentiment. You can have the bed, Adrian said. I'll take the floor. You are my... Radha stopped herself. You won the match. You should have the bed. The bed won't fit you anyway. Your feet will hang off by a mile. Radha looked at his small bed like it had personally insulted her. This is true. She sat back down, defeated by furniture. How do humans live in such small spaces? We manage. Adrian pulled out a blanket and pillow, setting them up near the fireplace. Though I admit, having a 7'3" orc warrior in residence is going to require some adjustments. 7'3", Radha repeated. You remembered. I'm a judge. Details matter. Something passed across Radha's face, a brief softness that disappeared almost immediately. She laid down on the floor, taking up most of the available space in the cottage. Adrian settled by the fireplace, watching the flames, wondering what in the world he'd just gotten himself into. Adrian, Radha's voice came from the darkness. Yes? Thank you for the food. You're welcome. Silence. Then, you are strange for a human. I get that a lot too. He heard what might have been a laugh, quickly stifled. Then nothing but the sound of the fire and the rain starting to fall through his roof's 3 known leak points. The next morning, Adrian woke up to find Radha standing in his kitchen area, staring at his food supplies like they were a military campaign that needed strategic planning. You have nothing, she announced. Adrian rubbed sleep from his eyes. Good morning to you too. 3 eggs, half a loaf of bread that is getting stale, cheese that smells questionable. Radha turned to look at him. In the morning light, filtering through his small windows, Her green skin had an almost golden cast to it. "How do you survive?" "I manage." "You keep saying that. I do not think you know what that word means." Adrian stood up, joints protesting. Sleeping on the floor near 40 was very different from sleeping on the floor at 20. "I eat at the tavern most days. Otto gives me meals in exchange for judging matches." "That is not sustainable," Rada said, sounding genuinely concerned. "You need proper meals, protein, vegetables, variety." "Since when do orc warriors care about nutritional variety?" "Since always," Rada said, offended. "Orc warriors must maintain peak physical condition. This requires balanced diet, proper training, adequate rest. You humans think we just eat meat and fight all day. It is stereotype." Adrian couldn't help but smile. "So you're telling me orcs are secretly health conscious?" "We are practical," Rada corrected. "A weak warrior is a dead warrior. A dead warrior cannot protect their clan. Therefore, warriors must maintain their bodies properly." She looked at his meager supplies again. "You are maintaining nothing properly." "I appreciate the concern, but I will hunt," Rada decided. "There are woods near here, yes? I saw them when we walked last night. There are woods, but then I will hunt. You will have proper meals." She headed for the door, then stopped. "Wait, I am bound to you. Do I need permission to hunt?" Adrian blinked. He'd completely forgotten about the whole "I own your service" thing. "You don't need my permission to do anything. That is not how orc tradition works." "Well, it's how my tradition works." Adrian stood up. "You're not my servant, Rada, or my slave, or my property. You're—" He trailed off, realizing he didn't have a word for what she was. "What am I?" Rada asked, genuinely curious. "A person who lost a bet and is honor-bound to stick around," Adrian said. "But that doesn't mean you give up your free will. Hunt if you want to hunt. Leave if you want to leave. I'm not going to command you to do anything." Rada stared at him like he'd just spoken in tongues. "You are very strange for a human." "So I've been told." She headed out, having to fold herself through the doorway again. "I will return with food. Proper food. Then we will discuss your training." "My what?" But she was already gone, her footsteps heavy enough to wake Vera next door. Sure enough, 5 minutes later, Vera knocked on Adrian's door. When he opened it, she had a tabby cat in her arms and a knowing look on her face. "So," Vera said, "you have an orc living with you now. It's complicated." "Mr. Whiskers says it's not complicated at all. He says you won her in a contest of strength and now she's bound to you by ancient tradition. And also, you both clearly have feelings for each other but are too stubborn to admit it." Adrian stared at the cat. The cat stared back, unimpressed. "Mr. Whiskers talks a lot," Adrian said finally. "He's very wise." Vera petted the cat. "Are you going to keep her?" "She's not a pet, Vera. That's not what I meant, and you know it." Vera gave him that look that older women give younger men when they're being intentionally dense. "She lost everything last night. Her perfect record, her ring, her identity as an undefeated warrior. And instead of being angry at you, she's making you breakfast. She went hunting. Same thing." Vera adjusted Mr. Whiskers in her arms. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "About what?" "About the fact that a 7'3" orc warrior just walked into your quiet, lonely, carefully controlled life and kicked it sideways." Vera smiled. "Mr. Whiskers says you've been alone for 3 years because you were afraid of getting hurt again. He says maybe the universe sent you someone who's too honorable to leave and too strong to break." "The universe didn't send me anything. I won a bet." "Same thing," Vera repeated. She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Mr. Whiskers says you should probably buy more food. He says orcs eat approximately 3 times what humans eat, and your current supplies will last maybe 2 days." Adrian watched her leave, still talking to her cat. He looked at his empty kitchen, then at his small cottage that somehow felt even smaller now that Rada had been in it. Maybe Vera, or Mr. Whiskers, had a point. Rada returned 3 hours later with 2 rabbits and a wild turkey. She also had mud on her armor, leaves in her hair, and a smile that suggested she'd enjoyed herself immensely. "Your woods are small," she announced, dropping the game on Adrian's tiny counter, "but they have good hunting. I found a stream with fish as well. Tomorrow I will catch fish." Adrian stared at the animals. That's a lot of meat." "That is 3 days of meals," Radha corrected. "Perhaps 4 if we are careful." She looked around. "Do you have proper knives, proper tools, a place to clean game?" "I have knives," Adrian said. "As for a place to clean game, outside then." Radha gathered the animals and headed out. Adrian followed, watching as she set up a workspace with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Her hands moved with practiced precision, skinning, gutting, sectioning the meat with minimal waste. "Among my people," Radha said as she worked, "hunting is sacred. We thank the animal for its sacrifice. We use everything, meat, fur, bones, sinew. Nothing is wasted. To waste is to dishonor the creature that gave its life." "That's beautiful," Adrian said, and meant it. Radha glanced at him, surprised. "You do not think it's savage? Primitive?" "Why would I?" "Because that is what humans usually think of orcs," Radha said, returning to her work. "That we are brutes, barbarians, mindless warriors who know only violence." Adrian sat down on his cottage steps, watching her. "I judged hundreds of matches, watched thousands of people interact. You know what I learned? The loudest assumptions are usually the wrongest ones." Radha paused in her work. "That is surprisingly wise. I have my moments." They worked in comfortable silence. Well, Radha worked while Adrian mostly tried not to get in the way. She transformed the game into neat portions of meat, stretched the furs on a makeshift frame to dry, separated bones and sinew for later use. "You said something about training," Adrian said eventually. "Yes." Radha wiped blood off her hands. "You defeated me through technique, not strength. But technique alone has limits. If you were stronger, you would be even more effective." "I'm not trying to become a warrior." "You are not trying to become anything," Radha said bluntly. "You watch. You judge. You exist on the edges of life, never participating. Why?" Adrian felt like she'd just punched him in the chest. "That's not—" "It is true," Radha interrupted. "I watched you last night. You know everything about arm wrestling, but you never compete. You know everyone in the tavern, but you sit alone. You are surrounded by life, but you do not live it." "Why?" "Because participating is how you get hurt," Adrian said before he could stop himself. Radha nodded slowly, like he'd just confirmed something she suspected. "You were hurt before. 3 years ago. Relationship ended badly. She wanted someone—" Adrian trailed off. "Someone bigger, more impressive, more everything. She was a fool," Radha said simply. "She was honest. Honesty and wisdom are not the same thing." Radha stood up, gathering the meat. "You think making yourself small will protect you from pain, but all it does is make you small. Pain finds you anyway." "That's pretty philosophical for an orc warrior." "I lost 49 consecutive victories last night," Radha said. "I have time for philosophy now." Adrian helped her carry the meat inside. As they worked together to prepare it for storage, salt it properly, set aside portions for cooking, he realized something strange was happening. This felt domestic, normal, like they'd been doing this for years instead of one day. "Can I ask you something?" Adrian said. "You may. Why did you really challenge me?" "The truth, not the warrior pride answer." Radha was quiet for a long moment, hands busy with wrapping meat. "I heard about the judge who never competed," she said finally. "And I thought, here is someone who is hiding, someone who is afraid, someone I could defeat easily." She looked at him. "I thought your weakness would prove my strength. And instead I learned that I was the one hiding behind strength, that I was the one who was afraid." She touched her bare right hand again. "Afraid that if I was not the strongest, I was nothing at all." The vulnerability in those words hit Adrian harder than any physical blow could have. This wasn't a warrior speaking anymore. This was just a person trying to figure out who they were when their entire identity had been stripped away. "You're not nothing," Adrian said quietly. "How would you know? You have known me for one day. I know you hunted to feed someone you barely know. I know you clean your game with respect and gratitude. I know you're honest even when it hurts." Adrian met her eyes. "I know you're more than your strength, Radha. I've known it since the moment you didn't rage at losing, just looked confused and lost." Radha's copper eyes were suspiciously bright. "You are still strange for a human, and you're not what I expected an orc to be." They stood in his tiny kitchen, surrounded by meat and memories. Two people who'd accidentally found each other at exactly the right moment to be exactly the wrong thing the other thought they needed. "I will teach you to be stronger," Radha said finally, "and you will teach me to be whatever it is you are. Careful, insufferable," Radha corrected, but she was smiling, actually smiling. "Yes, you will teach me to be insufferable like you. I can work with that." The next 3 weeks developed a rhythm that surprised both of them. Radha hunted in the mornings. Adrian worked at the tavern in the afternoons, judging matches and making sure Otto didn't drink his own inventory. Evenings were for training, Radha teaching Adrian proper form, proper breathing, proper strength exercises. Nights were for talking, usually around the small fireplace, until one or both of them fell asleep mid-sentence. The town, predictably, had opinions. "It's unnatural," Adrian overheard someone say in the market. "She's an orc living with a human man," someone else replied. "What did you expect?" "I expected her to eat him by now, honestly." Adrian bought his vegetables and said nothing. Radha, standing next to him and towering over everyone, said even less, but he noticed her hand clenching into a fist, knuckles turning slightly paler green. "Ignore them," Adrian said quietly as they walked home. "I am trying." Radha shifted the bags of supplies. She insisted on carrying everything, despite Adrian's protests. "Among orcs, if someone insults your honor, you challenge them to combat. Here, you just ignore it. Here, we recognize that some people's opinions aren't worth the energy it takes to argue. That seems inefficient. That's civilization." Radha made a sound that was half laugh, half growl. "Civilization is complicated." They walked in silence until they reached Adrian's cottage. Their cottage now, though neither had officially acknowledged the shift. Vera was waiting outside with Mr. Whiskers. "Good afternoon, you two," Vera said cheerfully. "Mr. Whiskers says you're the talk of the town." "Mr. Whiskers should mind his own business," Adrian said. "He says he would, but you're much more interesting than birds." Vera petted her cat. "He also says you should probably get married soon before the gossip gets worse." Adrian choked on air. Radha dropped the bags. "Vera," Adrian managed. "That's not how this works," Radha finished. "Adrian is I am bound to him by honor. That is different from marriage." "Mr. Whiskers says it looks the same from the outside," Vera said. "Living together, sharing meals, him teaching you about human customs, you teaching him about orc traditions. Sounds like marriage to me." "That's not what's happening," Adrian said, trying to regain control of the conversation. "Then what is happening?" Vera asked innocently. Adrian and Radha looked at each other. Neither had an answer. Vera smiled. "That's what I thought. Mr. Whiskers says you have 6 months tops before you both figure out what everyone else already knows. He also says there's a betting pool at the tavern about when you'll make it official. I put 5 silver on before winter." She walked away, still talking to her cat. "I do not understand that woman," Radha said. "Nobody does," Adrian replied. "But she's rarely wrong." They carried the supplies inside, both pointedly not discussing what Vera had said. But that night, as they prepared the rabbit Radha had caught that morning, Adrian noticed she'd started humming while she worked. A low, rhythmic sound that he'd learned was an orc traveling song. "You're happy," he observed. Radha stopped humming. "I am content." "That is different." "Is it?" She considered this while turning meat over the fire. "Among orcs, Happiness is connected to victory, to proving strength, to being the best. She touched her bare right hand absently, a gesture that was becoming less frequent, but never fully disappeared. I have been happy many times, but content, this is new. What's the difference? Happiness is loud, Radha said. It shouts and celebrates and demands attention. Contentment is quiet. It sits by a fire and hums traveling songs and does not need to prove anything to anyone. Adrian felt something shift in his chest. I like contentment. So do I, Radha said quietly. Then, Adrian? Yes? Thank you for not treating me like a servant, for not using the oath as a weapon. You don't need to thank me for basic decency. Perhaps decency is not as basic as you think, Radha said. She served the meat, dividing it into portions with the automatic precision of someone who'd spent 3 weeks learning his eating habits. In my clan, when someone is bound by oath, they become invisible, a tool. Their personhood stops mattering. That's horrible. That is tradition. Radha sat down across from him. But you argued with me about hunting techniques yesterday. You told me I was wrong about how to repair the roof. You treat me like an equal, even though by our agreement I am not. You are an equal, Adrian said firmly. The only thing the bet determined was who won a match, not who's worth more as a person. Radha was quiet for a long moment. You would have made a terrible orc. I'll take that as a compliment. It was meant as one. They ate in comfortable silence. Outside, rain started to fall, heavier than usual, drumming against the roof with increasing intensity. Adrian mentally tracked it against his map of leak points. 2 drops by the fireplace, 1 near the bed, none by the door. Your roof is leaking, Radha observed, watching water drip into the bowl Adrian had placed by the fireplace. It does that. We should fix it properly. We? Yes. Radha stood up, studying the ceiling like it was a military fortification that needed assessment. I know how to repair thatching. It is not difficult, just time-consuming. If we work together, we could have it done in a day. You don't have to do that. I want to, Radha said. She looked at him, and in the firelight, her copper eyes were almost golden. This is my home too now, is it not? Adrian felt his heart do something complicated. Yeah, he said, yeah, it is. The next day, they repaired the roof together. Radha doing the high work that would have required Adrian to risk his neck on a ladder, Adrian passing up materials and tools, both of them working in the kind of synchronized rhythm that people develop when they're truly comfortable with each other. Otto, passing by on his way to the market, stopped to watch. You know, he called up, I haven't seen Adrian smile like that in 3 years. Like what? Adrian asked. Like someone who remembers how to be happy, Otto said. Good for you, both of you. He walked on, humming. Adrian looked up at Radha, who was securing the last section of thatch. She was covered in straw, had dirt on her face, and was the most beautiful thing he'd never admitted he wanted to see. Radha, he called up. Yes? I'm glad you lost that match. She looked down at him, surprised. Then slowly a smile spread across her face, genuine and unguarded, and full of something that looked dangerously like joy. So am I, she said. So am I. But of course, happiness has a way of attracting attention from those who don't want to see it exist. Drog arrived on a Tuesday morning. Adrian heard him before he saw him, the sound of heavy footsteps that made Radha's seem light, approaching with the inevitability of bad weather. He looked out the window and saw an orc male, even larger than Radha, wearing battle armor that had seen recent use. Radha, who'd been preparing breakfast, went completely still. Drog, she said quietly. Friend of yours? Clanmate? Warrior? She set down the knife she'd been using. This is not a social visit. Adrian opened the door before Drog could knock. The orc warrior had to duck even lower than Radha did, his shoulders scraping both sides of the doorframe. He looked at Adrian with the kind of assessment that came from decades of sizing up opponents. Then he laughed. It was a big laugh, loud enough to make the windows rattle, but there was no real humor in it, more like disbelief with sound attached. "This," Drog said, still laughing, "this is the human who defeated Rada Ironhide, this small, thin judge?" He laughed again, especially uncomfortable with his own noise. The clan elders did not believe the report. "Now I see why. It is impossible." "It happened," Rada said, stepping forward. Her voice had changed and become harder, more formal. "I challenged him honorably. I lost honorably. I'm bound by Warrior's Oath until he releases me." "You are bound by stupidity," Drog corrected. He turned his attention back to Adrian. "No offense, human, but Rada is strongest warrior in our clan, besides chieftain. She has 49 consecutive victories. To lose to you is like sun deciding not to rise. It makes no sense." 49 consecutive victories, Adrian said carefully. "That's exactly why she lost. She never learned what to do when strength wasn't enough." Drog's face went from laughing to dangerous in the space of a heartbeat. "You dare insult—" "He insults truth," Rada interrupted, "and truth is not insult. I lost because I was arrogant, because I underestimated him, because I believed strength was all that mattered." She met Drog's eyes steadily. "I was wrong." Drog stared at her like she'd just grown a second head. "The clan wants you back. Elders say this oath is not valid. You were compromised, not thinking clearly. It does not count." "I was thinking perfectly clearly," Rada said. "And oath is oath, Drog. You know this. To break it would dishonor everything we believe. To stay with a human dishonors everything we believe." "Does it?" Rada's voice was quiet but carried steel underneath. "Or does it dishonor what we've decided to believe, because it's comfortable?" The silence that followed was the kind that precedes violence. Adrian could see Drog's hands clenching into fists, see the rage building behind his eyes. He'd watched enough fights to know when one was about to start. "Drog," Adrian said carefully, "you're welcome to stay for breakfast. Or you can challenge me yourself if you think the original match was unfair, but you're not welcome to threaten Rada in her home." "Her home?" Drog looked around at the small cottage. "This is not home. This is cage, prison." He focused on Rada again. "Come back with me. Elders will understand. We will say you were under enchantment, human trickery. We will do nothing," Rada said, "because I am not returning." The words hung in the air like dropped swords. Drog stared at her. "What?" "I am not returning," Rada repeated. "To the clan, to the mountains, to the life where strength is all that matters and weakness is death." She stood straighter, and despite being in a human cottage that was too small for her, despite having lost her ring and her perfect record, she looked more like a warrior than Adrian had ever seen her. "I have learned more in 3 weeks here than I learned in 28 years there. And I am not finished learning." "You have been corrupted," Drog said, "by human weakness, by soft living, by kindness," Rada interrupted, "by being treated as person instead of weapon, by discovering that there is more to life than proving strength." She gestured to Adrian without looking away from Drog. "This human defeated me without being bigger or stronger or more traditionally powerful. He defeated me with knowledge, understanding, technique, things I never learned because I never thought I needed them. I was wrong." Drog was shaking his head. "Elders will not accept this." "Elders do not have to," Rada said. "My oath is to Adrian, not to them, not to you, not to the clan." Her voice softened slightly. "Drog, I know this is difficult to understand, but I am happy here. Content. These are feelings I did not know I could have. Happiness is for the weak." "Then I am weak," Rada said simply, "and I am okay with that." Drog looked between them, Rada standing firm, Adrian trying to look braver than he felt, the small cottage with its repaired roof and smell of breakfast cooking. Something changed in his face, some calculation being revised. "The clan will not forget this," he said finally. "I know. You may not be welcome back. I know that too." Drog turned to leave, then paused. "Rada?" Yes? I hope you are right about this. His voice had lost some of its edge, replaced by something that sounded almost like concern. I hope this human is worth betraying everything we know. He is not worth betraying everything, Rada said. He is worth discovering that everything we knew was incomplete. Drog laughed again, that same uncomfortable, too loud laugh, and left. His footsteps faded into the distance, leaving silence and tension behind. Adrian let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Are you okay? No, Rada said honestly. She sat down heavily, the chair creaking under her weight. I just chose you over my entire clan, over my entire life, over everything I have ever known. She looked at her hands. And I am terrified that I made wrong choice. Adrian sat down next to her. You can still go back. The oath. Oath is oath, Rada interrupted. That is not why I stay. Then why? Rada was quiet for a long moment. Because, for first time in my life, I wake up and do not feel like I have to prove anything. I just exist. And that is enough. She finally looked at him. Do you understand? I've spent 28 years being the strongest, the fiercest, the most warrior-like, and I was good at it, but I was never happy, just successful. And now I am unsuccessful orc, living in too small cottage with strange human who argues about hunting techniques. Rada's mouth twitched into almost smile. And I am happier than I have ever been. That is both wonderful and terrifying. Adrian reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. Her skin was warm, calloused, rough from years of combat and survival. Her hand dwarfed his completely. For what it's worth, Adrian said, I'm glad you stayed. Why? Rada asked. I am difficult, I break furniture, I eat too much, I have brought problems to your door. Because, Adrian interrupted, you make breakfast without being asked. You fixed my roof. You laugh at my terrible jokes. You argue with me when you think I'm wrong. You're honest even when it hurts. He squeezed her hand gently. You make my small, quiet life feel less lonely. Rada stared at their joined hands. I make you happy. Yeah, you do. That is strange, Rada said softly. I make me happy too, being here, with you. They sat like that for a while, hands linked, breakfast getting cold on the table, the morning sun streaming through the now properly repaired roof. Two people from completely different worlds, finding comfort in the space between them. Adrian? Rada said eventually. Yes? What is love? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Adrian felt his heart start racing. That's a complicated question. I know. That is why I ask. Rada still wasn't looking at him, still staring at their hands. Among orcs, we have loyalty, duty, honor, respect. But love is human word, human concept. I do not fully understand it. I'm not sure humans fully understand it either, Adrian admitted. But I think it's when someone else's happiness becomes essential to your own happiness, when you'd rather be uncomfortable with them than comfortable without them, when you want them to stay, not because they're obligated to, but because the thought of them leaving makes everything seem wrong. Rada was very quiet. That sounds terrifying. It is. It also sounds like what I feel. Adrian's breath caught. Rada, I am not asking you to love me back, Rada said quickly. I know I am orc. I know I am too large, too strange, too everything that is wrong for a human man. I know the town gossips. I know this is impossible. She finally looked at him, copper eyes, bright and vulnerable. But I need you to know. I need to say it out loud, even if you do not feel same way. Adrian felt something break open in his chest, something that had been locked and guarded for 3 years since his last relationship had taught him that being himself wasn't enough. I need to tell you something, Adrian said, about why I never competed, why I just watched. You do not have to. I want to. Adrian took a breath. 3 years ago I was engaged. Her name was Catherine. Beautiful, smart, ambitious, everything I thought I wanted. But she had one complaint. I wasn't impressive enough. I was just a judge, just average height, just normal strength. She wanted someone who stood out, who commanded attention, who made other people jealous. Radha's jaw tightened. She was fool. Maybe, but her words stuck, so I stopped trying, stopped competing, stopped putting myself out there. I told myself I was being careful, being smart. Really, I was just being afraid. Adrian met her eyes. Then you walked in, challenged me to something I hadn't done in years, and forced me to remember that sometimes hiding is worse than losing. I forced you to win, Radha corrected. You forced me to try, Adrian said, and in trying, I found you. This impossible, argumentative, roof-fixing, breakfast-making orc warrior who makes me laugh and challenges me and makes my life feel full in ways I forgot were possible. He squeezed her hand. So yeah, Radha, I think I might love you too, even though it's impossible, even though the town gossips, even though you're 7'3" and I'm 5'11", and we have absolutely nothing in common except somehow having everything in common. Radha's eyes were definitely wet now. That was very good speech. I've been practicing. In your head or with the neighbor's cat? Little bit of both. Radha laughed, a real laugh, full of joy and relief and something that sounded like hope. Then, moving carefully like she was afraid of breaking something precious, she leaned down and kissed him. It was awkward. The height difference made it complicated. Her tusks bumped his cheek. She tasted like the mint tea she'd been drinking. It was the best kiss Adrian had ever had. When they pulled apart, Radha was smiling. I have never kissed a human before. I've never kissed an orc before. We are both very bad at this. We'll get better with practice. Is that a promise? It's a commitment. Radha pulled him closer. And despite the awkwardness, despite the height difference, despite everything that said this shouldn't work, they fit. Like two pieces of a puzzle that came from different boxes, but somehow belonged together anyway. Outside, Vera walked by with Mr. Whiskers. They heard her voice through the window. You owe me 5 silver, Otto. I told you it would be before winter. It's still autumn, Otto's voice protested. Technically, autumn ends next week, Vera replied. Mr. Whiskers says I win on a technicality. Inside the cottage, Adrian and Radha looked at each other and laughed. We are never going to have privacy again, are we? Radha asked. Not even a little bit. Good, Radha said. I am tired of hiding, from my clan, from your town, from what I feel. She touched his face gently, her hand so large it covered half his head. I want everyone to know. This strange human judge is mine. And I am his. What about the oath? What about it? Don't you want me to release you from it? Radha considered this. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out the iron ring, the one with 49 marks, the one Adrian had won from her. He'd given it to her the next day, told her to keep it as a reminder of what she'd accomplished, not what she'd lost. This ring, Radha said, represents 49 times I won through strength alone. 49 times I proved I was strongest, but the 50th time, she pressed the ring into Adrian's hand. The 50th time, I learned something more valuable than any victory. I learned that losing can lead to winning in ways you never expected, that weakness can become strength, that the smallest person can teach the largest one what really matters. That's beautiful, Adrian said. I have been practicing too, Radha admitted, with the neighbor's cat. He is surprisingly good listener. Mr. Whiskers gets around. Indeed. Radha closed Adrian's fingers around the ring. Keep this, not as trophy, as promise. I do not need 50 victories anymore. I only need one person who sees me as more than warrior, more than orc, more than tradition and strength, and all the things I used to think defined me. I see you, Adrian said. Just you, and you're more than enough. Radha kissed him again. This time it was less awkward. They were learning. 6 months later, on a spring morning, when the air smelled like new grass and possibility, Adrian and Radha stood in front of the cottage they'd expanded together. New rooms added, ceiling raised, furniture rebuilt to accommodate someone 7'3". Vera was there with Mr. Whiskers. Otto was there with a cask of his best ale. A few townspeople who'd decided that maybe an orc and a human together wasn't the end of the world had come to celebrate. No one from Radha's clan came. That hurt, Adrian knew. He saw her watching the road sometimes, hoping for familiar faces that never appeared. But Drog did come, alone without armor, looking uncomfortable in ways that had nothing to do with his size. "I am not here officially," he said by way of greeting. "Clan still does not approve." "Then why are you here?" Radha asked. "Because you are my friend," Drog said simply, "and friends show up, even when it is complicated." He thrust a wrapped bundle at her. "This is from your mother. She could not come, but she wanted you to have it." Radha unwrapped the bundle with shaking hands. Inside was a battle standard, the kind orc warriors carried into their first real combat. Embroidered on it were symbols that represented strength, honor, and love. "She made this?" Radha asked, voice thick. "She made it," Drog confirmed. "She says she does not understand your choice, but she respects it and she hopes you are happy." "I am," Radha said, tears falling freely now. "Tell her I'm happier than I ever thought possible." Drog nodded. He looked at Adrian. "You, small human judge." "Yes? You take care of her, or I will come back, and next time I will not be friendly visit." "Understood," Adrian said seriously. Drog laughed, that same uncomfortable, too loud laugh. "You are a strange human, but you make her happy. That is what matters." He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, Radha." "Yes? 49 consecutive victories is still record in our clan. No one has broken it. Your legacy remains, even if you do not." Radha watched him go, clutching her mother's battle standard. Adrian put his arm around her, or as much as he could reach. She bent down so he could properly hold her. "You okay?" he asked. "No," Radha said honestly. "I miss my clan. I miss my mother. I miss the mountains and the traditions and the life I knew." She looked at him. "But I do not regret leaving." "Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense." They stood together, watching the sun rise over their home, their town, their impossible life that somehow worked anyway. Vera was arguing with Mr. Whiskers about something. Otto was trying to open the ale cask and failing. The townspeople were setting up tables for the celebration. "Adrian," Radha said. "Yes? Thank you." "For what?" "For winning that match. For teaching me that losing can be the best thing that ever happens to you. For showing me that strength comes in many forms." She kissed the top of his head. "For seeing me when I could not see myself." "Right back at you," Adrian said. "All of it." Vera appeared next to them, Mr. Whiskers in her arms. "Mr. Whiskers says you two are disgustingly cute, and he's very proud he predicted this 6 months ago." "Tell Mr. Whiskers he's a genius," Adrian said. "He already knows," Vera replied. "He also says you should probably start the celebration before Otto drinks all the ale himself." They turned toward their gathered friends and neighbors. Radha took Adrian's hand, her massive palm completely enveloping his, and together they walked toward the life they'd accidentally built from an impossible bet and a surprising loss. Later that night, after the celebration had ended and the guests had gone home, Adrian and Radha sat in their expanded cottage, full of good food and better company. "Do you ever regret it?" Adrian asked. "The match? The oath? Everything that came after?" Radha thought about it seriously, as she did with all his questions. "I regret the pain it caused," she said finally. "I regret hurting my mother. I regret the clan seeing me as traitor. I regret that Drog has to visit in secret." She touched the battle standard her mother had made, now hanging on their wall. "But I do not regret the choice. I do not regret you, even though I'm small and weak and insufferable. Especially because you are small and weak and insufferable," Radha corrected, smiling. You are also brave and kind and wise. You are teacher and partner and love. You are everything I did not know I needed, until I lost a bet I was certain I would win. Adrian looked at the iron ring on his finger. He'd started wearing it after Radha said it looked strange on him, but perfect anyway. 49 marks, representing 49 victories. And one mark he'd added himself, smaller and different, representing the victory that came from losing. "I love you," Adrian said. "I love you too," Radha replied. "Even though you are impossibly small and I am impossibly large, and we make no sense together." "Especially because of that," Adrian corrected. Outside, spring rain began to fall, but this time it didn't leak through the roof. This time, the cottage held strong, expanded and improved by two people who'd learned that the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. Sometimes the bravest warriors aren't those who never lose. They're the ones who lose everything and find something better in the ruins. They're the ones who discover that victory measured in strength means nothing compared to victory measured in love. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is admit you were wrong, change your mind, and choose a different path. Even when that path is impossibly small, impossibly strange, and impossibly perfect. Adrian walked into that tavern expecting another ordinary night. He walked out with a 7'3" orc warrior who would change his life forever. Sometimes the best things happen when we stop hiding and start living. Have you ever won by losing? Ever found something precious in the ruins of defeat? Drop a comment below. I read every single one, and your stories inspire the next tales we tell. If Radha and Adrian's impossible love touched your heart, smash that like button. It tells me you want more stories like this, more warriors who choose love over tradition, more hearts that refuse to accept impossible as an answer. And if you're new to Orcbound Tales, hit that subscribe button right now. This is where orcs aren't just monsters in the dark. They're people with hearts, dreams, fears, and the courage to love across any boundary. We release new emotional fantasy stories every week, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. The strongest warriors aren't those who never fall. They're those who fall in love, despite everything telling them not to. Welcome to Orcbound Tales, where impossible love becomes inevitable,